Hello and welcome to As Built, the podcast from Graphic Machine about architecture firms, buildings, and how both get built. I'm your co-host, Patience Jones. With me as ever is
Brian Jones,
who kind of had to do a check-in and make sure that he was in fact who he thought he was. And he is. So let's commence.
Yes.
In today's episode, we are talking about fighting social sameness.
Yes, we are.
The end.
Yeah.
So, social sameness, break it down.
So, in our minds, I imagine logging onto a social platform like Insta, for instance, and looking at any 10 architecture firms, and you will begin to see a trend in the types of posts that are present on a fair number of them out there, which is picture of a project, picture of their team, if you're lucky, maybe some drone footage, and then another picture of a project for good measure. But as you switch between firm to firm, the buildings are different, yes, but the mechanism of explaining it could leave you not sure which firm you had visited unless you truly knew which building was assigned to which firm, which is harder for a non-professional to do than you might think. So it's very unique to you because you worked on it for 2 years and you understand every aspect of it. But yeah.
You dream about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that is the social sameness that we are currently fighting.
So I'm going to ask a question because I think it's often silently asked. Why does it matter if non-architecture professionals understand the difference?
Well, the main reason is that absent any other details or information about the problem that you solved to create a building, you're leaving it up to whether they like it or not. And there's a part of it that's necessary. But if that's the only part of it, then it gets really, you only have a practice around people who happen to a particular building, which may or may not solve the problem that they have themselves.
Well, and the other reason is because you as an architecture firm are selling to people who are not architects.
That's the main reason.
For the most part.
Yeah.
Like maybe there are firms that sell certain discrete services to larger firms, but 99% of the time, that's who you're selling to, whether it's, developers or homeowners or municipal governments or whoever it is. If they don't understand why you've put something up or what they're looking at or that you did this building versus that building, those are all missed opportunities. And that's why it matters. If your social feed exists strictly to entertain and inform your own firm, then you can just, you don't have to listen to the rest of this episode because you just put up what you want to put up and, everybody oohs and ahs and it's fine. For most firms, that's not the case.
Yeah. And it is pervasive for sure. It seems as though professionally things have gotten pretty stuck on really nice photography. Video is used sparingly and is not really part of conveying the experience of a building, which is really critical to a person thinking about, is this the right firm for me? Or have I stumbled upon somebody that might be able to solve my problem? And it's definitely a missed opportunity because it's something that is highly consumable and is something that somebody could stumble across and discover your firm that hadn't before.
I feel like what we're seeing is almost like an overcorrection from early days when firms were putting out, pictures of anything, candid shots, photos taken by random employees. And everybody said, oh my gosh, that's not professional enough, that, I want to see the work. And why are you demeaning the work by not having professional photography? And so now we've gone completely in the other direction where it's only professional photography and only staged shots of employees. And that was okay for a while, but now society has caught up to that and they're kind of bored with that. And what they want is more about the process and the behind the scenes. And they still want the high res glamour shots of the projects. And they still want, the photos of the happy team accepting an award and having lunch together. But they also want to see, what does a site visit look like? What does it look like in the studio when you're working on a project? I want to hear from one of the architects about their view on this particular project or why it was done the way that it was.
All really good options and things that would be relatively easy to put together in any practice's studio with equipment that they probably already have on them. I mean, this is not a,
Yes and no.
Yeah.
It is technically easy and factually easy, but I think two things stand in the way almost universally. One is the fear of both putting or showing any of the behind the scenes things because you think it's not, you're worried about being judged. The second thing is you're worried about somebody copying it or poaching your employee or stealing something.
Sure.
The second thing that gets in the way of doing this often is the desire for everything to be perfect.
It is.
So when we get the high res photo, the project photo that's been taken with super great high res equipment and edited to within an inch of its life, and all the imperfections removed, and the sunlight looks perfect, and the grass is the right color, then we sort of say, okay, now this can go out into the world. The idea that we would put a photo out that where something might not be perfect, you know, somebody's shirt isn't completely tucked in, or there's a coffee cup in the edge, or the angle isn't what they wanted it to be, or the lighting is slightly off. We're not saying put bad photos out,
No.
but non-architecture professionals understand that there's a difference between, you know, the hashtag no filter photos and a professional portfolio shot.
Yeah.
They're not expecting, and they would think it was weird if you had, you know, here's a photo of our team working on a project, and it was like everybody was photoshopped and everybody'd been airbrushed, and, you know, the color was oversaturated. That's just weird. People want, and I hate this word, everyone knows it, authenticity.
Yep.
But they want it. And they want the feeling of being in the space looking at the thing. They're not looking at these pictures as pictures, they're looking at them as view. So what's the viewport that you're giving people?
Yeah. Well, and I think that is very true. I do think that, to your point, though, that starting to create and craft some with the idea that not everything that you make will go out the door, but that to try to get to that point where you can see a handful of things that you've made that are like, yep, these are good enough, they can go out the door. And I think you're exactly right about the perfectionism being the barrier to getting things into the social space. But it's really critical to keep trying to make those things, even, you know, if a few of them don't make it out the door.
It reminds me of this friend who's an artist, and her process starts with making something that she knows is really bad. And you can query, you know, is there such a thing as bad art? But let's assume that there is. At least in her mind, she knows when she's made something that she feels is good or bad. And to get over the fear of, is the next thing I make going to be any good or is it going to be bad? She intentionally makes something that she knows is really bad, because then she's like, all right, now I've done it. I've done the bad thing. I've gotten the bad thing out of my system. Whatever I make is going to be better than this. And it's not that the next thing that she makes will be the thing that gets made public. It's that it allows her to proceed and to create more things. So if that's something that you find appealing, do that. Create some absurd social post that's just bad. Don't publish it. Don't put it in draft. Don't even create the possibility that it will get accidentally published, but just make it. And now you've made the bad thing.
Yep. And now you can move on.
Yeah. Whatever you make won't be as bad as that. So just do it.
Well, and part of it too is that because there's such a social post has a very limited lifespan. And so getting hung up on that part of the equation will keep you from ever doing anything. And I think that what matters more is that you have a greater variety of things that you're sharing, and that you have a greater variety of things that have a potential to help communicate what it is that you do and how you do it, and not just a final outcome. Because a final outcome can leave people with the impression that it didn't take very much to get there, because they don't see all the underlying work and they don't see all the underlying process that got them there.
I forget which handbag manufacturer it was, if it was Louis Vuitton or if it was Hermes. It also could have been somebody else. But they created a series of videos that showed all of the process and the handiwork that goes into making one bag, and the number of people who are involved in it and how long it takes. And if you were just to look at a picture of an Hermes bag and a picture of a knockoff next to each other and look at the price, you would probably say, well, why should I, spend this much money? And I am not saying that everyone should go out and buy an Hermes bag or that is, a responsible use of resources. I'm not weighing in on that. But I think it was brilliant to show this is how we create something that to a lot of people looks exactly the same, but it's not. And here's why this is superior. Here's why this is more of an artisan product. Here is why this has more value. That is a lesson that can be taken away.
So speaking of, what do you think the big takeaways are from the Fighting Social thing?
Buy an Hermes bag. No, I'm not. No. I think not being afraid to consider being different and thinking about really what is that viewport? What is the viewport into your firm and your approach and your process and your people, and going forward with your social in that vein?
I think that's such a good point where it is about the not being afraid, but it's also sometimes I think there's a tendency to try to look like you're a part of a certain group. And by mirroring that, you actually make it so that nobody can distinguish one from the other. And I think that's something you have to kind of fight against pretty hard because everything else will tell you that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's kind of a trajectory. I think when firms are first starting out or they're very small, they almost need to look like everybody else to be taken seriously and to be considered in that same group of firm, that same echelon. Once they're considered part of that group, now they need to look different again and they need to push up and through because otherwise they won't ever be differentiated and thought of separately. They'll just be part of a, was it that firm or that firm? No, it was the one that did this thing. Oh, they're kind of all the same.
Never a compliment.
No, it rarely is. It's so funny because I feel like we're taught this is good. This is, the inner workings of my mind. So you're welcome. But I feel like we're taught as kids that it's so important to be the same, so important to fit in, and everybody needs, don't make waves, don't be different. And a lot of us go through this period where we're like, well, F that, I'm going to be as different as I possibly can. And sometimes that turns out well and sometimes it doesn't. And then we're sort of told again, well, now that you've had this phase, you need to fit in. You need to be the same and everybody has to look the same and everybody has to dress the same and everybody has to speak the same. And this is how you achieve success. And I think it really does a disservice to us as people, especially long term, because when we get to this point and we have to differentiate in order to grow and succeed, we still have this nagging voice in the back of our head that's, no, don't be different. Different is wrong. Standing out is wrong. It means you're not professional. It means you're putting yourself out there as a target.
You're not part of that group.
Right. Like the cool kids won't like you. And it's a little sobering to think, almost 5 decades on, there's still that feeling that you have to fight against. That's
got it.
This is good. This, you need to do this.
It's good for your brand. It's good for you as a person, and it's good for culture at large.
Yeah, it really is, because it would be so super boring if everything was the same. Yep. So yeah, don't be boring.
Don't be boring.
Yeah. Well, thank you for letting us be not boring with you. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time.